Hi, I'm G. Welcome back to my art channel, and today I'm going to have a little bit of a go with some acrylic paints, which is a little bit different to the kind of thing that I usually use. But the kind folks at Trimcraft and Nova have sent me this pack of 24 premium acrylic paints. So I thought I'd have a little go with them and I'll let you know what I thought. So the nice folks at Trimcraft UK sent me this box of premium acrylic paint, and it's got 24 small tubes in it, so quite a large amount of colours, and it retails for about £12.99 in GB pounds. So if you're a newcomer to acrylics, then you might be suddenly like, what's he talking about, and paying immediate interest. So on the back it gives you a little bit of a swatch idea of what the paints look like, but when I rip it open and I unbox it, it's going to give you a bit of a closer look on not only the paints, but also the 3 free brushes that come with it. So there you've got all 24 paints, and each of the sleeves on the tubes has got a nice big chunky colour of exactly what's inside that tube. So I'll be having a look later to see if they match up with the swatch or not. And the brushes look pretty good. Obviously they're free brushes, so you're probably not expecting super duper sable ones, but here you go. You've got a very, very thin one, not quite a rigger, but something quite nice and thin, probably a size 3, and 2 flatter head brushes. The tubes themselves are metal with a little plastic top, and they are 12 millilitres or 0.4 US fluid ounces, and it's got both the colour and the name of the colour kind of stamped on the outside packaging. When you flip off the top, they're sealed with foil like most paints and tubes are, but you can just reverse the top and it's got a little sort of pointy bit that you can use to pierce the foil and allow that acrylic to come popping out. So, not having used acrylic in over 20 years, I thought I'd ease myself in gently and slowly with these and start with something simple like a swatch. So here you can see I've set out with a bit of 216 GSM ultra smooth card, nice and bright and white, so it will really show up the colours, and I've just chopped it up with a ruler, so I've made up some squares, and I'm just putting my first lightest colour in there. It's the lightest yellow colour, and I'm not using any water. This is just pure pigment going on, and I'm using one of the brushes that came with the set, which seems to be quite a nice soft synthetic brush. So I repeat the same steps with each of the colours until I'm finishing off with the very last one, black. And already I'm getting a feel that there's a nice flow to these acrylics. Some acrylics are very thick and pasty when they come out of the tube, but not these. These actually flow really, really nicely. They're quite transparent, which is something that you can expect from acrylics anyway, but when the whole swatch was done, I was impressed by the range of colours that they had here. Tahiti gold is my yellow ochre, which I used to use all of the time. But when I zoom in a bit closer, you can see, perhaps it's partly the way I've brushed them, but perhaps it's partly their transparency. You can see quite a lot of that transparency in some of the brush strokes, in some of the colours. Not all, but in some of them. So I thought what I'd do is put a second coat on violet to see if that made any difference, and then compare it side by side, 1 coat on the left and 2 coat on the right, and it does look as though it is a little bit more uniform in terms of colour and less streaky, but still you can see forest above it, a green, very transparent, and then black below, obviously very, very opaque. So after that easy start, I thought I'd then jump in the deep end and have a go using them on canvas. So you can see me putting the colours in the palette after having drawn out the picture that I'm going to tackle using watercolour pencils on the actual primed canvas. So you can see I've started a little bit in the corner, but here I am, and acrylic purists will probably be howling and up in arms right now because I tend to use them like watercolours. I will pick them up on the brush, pop them on the canvas, and try and blend and work them on the canvas, which is probably not the best way to use acrylics. If anybody out there uses acrylics, they'll know that they dry really, really, really quickly. And this is a very risky way of trying to put the paint on. But it's kind of the way that I know. I'm sure if I use acrylics more, I will get to know some shortcuts, get to know some different techniques. And even by the end of this video, I'm already beginning to see the sense in perhaps a first layer and then a second layer using the acrylics. But right now I'm popping on a nice yellow, which is sunflower yellow, and I'm adding some red Milano, which is a red, but it's a very scarlety orange red, and I'm using that for this flower that is it's a red and yellow tulip. So I'm popping the colours on and I'm blending them with one of the brushes that came with the pack. So it's this nice, soft but springy, synthetic, flat-headed brush. And you can see me just adding a little bit of white there, blending it in while the acrylic is still just about wet. And some of it's laying on the surface, some of it's blending with the colours underneath that are still a little bit wet. And so far, so good. I haven't been tempted to use any water with them yet because they flow so easily when you're actually trying to paint them. So all the water on my brush is just from actually washing the colours off the brush. So the first petal seems to go okay, so I'm moving into this section which is darker, so I'm going to be using more colours here, more of this red Milano you can see me slapping on there, but also with some of that yellow I've already put on, so I've got a kind of a base yellow that I can try and blend in while they're all still wet. And I'm also going to use a slightly darker red here, one that comes with the pack called Crimson. And that's just going to be for my deeper, darker shadows so that I can really make this petal pop out. And again, I put that on while the colours are all still wet in the hope that I can kind of move it, work it with the brush and blend together with the colours that are on underneath. And it seems to be working fine so far. I mean, I'm using three colours that are fairly transparent anyway, and they have a lot of fluidity to them. With an opaque colour, things might be different. I am working on this flower painting as an acrylic tutorial for my channel, so if you want to be able to see this, make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already, so you don't miss this one. And also when it's done, I'll post the links for it actually above here and also below in the description. So canvas seemed to be going well, so I thought I'd try them on glass next. So I stuck down my glass jar on a bit of blue tack so it wouldn't move, and here you can see me using a combination of blue and white just to blend together to get a gradually changing sky and then some streaky blue sea underneath. Once I'd let that dry, I decided I'd go in and put a second coat on to paint in a sailboat, which worked okay, but I've got to say it was still very transparent even with a second coat on top of what is white in the background. Then I thought I'd try a stone, so I got a little smooth stone, and I thought I'd use green on this one. And here's where I really embraced the idea of having to do a second coat. So I put on this first coat using white and a light green and a dark green and trying to blend them as best as possible, but not worrying too much. Then I left that to dry, came back to it half an hour later and put on a second coat, and this went on I think a lot better. The whites and the mid green looked terrific, and then blending the dark green around the sides just really seemed to work a lot better on top of the previous coat, and there was no lifting and no flaking at all happening with this. So after my first go, I had to admit I'd really enjoyed using them. They were a really good selection of colours, and they were bright colours to boot. They flowed really easily off the brushes, and the three brushes that came with them, I used two of them, and they were pretty decent. I thought they worked really well on a smooth mid-tone surface like the pebble, especially when I got used to using two layers. On the glass, I thought they were too transparent. You know, that's quite a thick blue that I was using there. So I'm not so sure how much I'd use them on glass. But stones and canvas and cards seem to work absolutely brilliantly. That's the pros. So the cons were that they were quite transparent, which to me suggests lots of binder and a bit less pigment. And if you wanted to add water to slow down the drying, this will end up thinning them even more. They might be good for texture, but in such small tubes, I probably would add something first of all to build up the texture before I actually started painting with these acrylics. I hope you liked my first go with NOVA Acrylic Paints. If you did, leave a comment below and maybe think of subscribing, liking or sharing. And there are loads of other product review and first go videos on my channel, from watercolors to fabric markers, so why not check out some of those as well. Thanks for watching.